Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 253 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. This week, something slightly different. Today I'm joined by Stephen Barnes, Vice Chair of the British Beekeepers Association, for a chat about all things BBKA. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by Stephen Barnes, the Vice Chair of the BBKA, the British Beekeepers Association. And Stephen and I chatted several years ago, I think, wasn't it, Stephen? When we first met.
The spring convention before COVID.
So some time ago, we'd kind of got this planned at that point, but then various things have kind of got in the way and we've never really got together to talk about it, have we? So you're very welcome. I don't really interview people on my podcast, so this is kind of new for me as well. So we'll see how we get on. But I guess the typical question to start off with is, how did you get involved in beekeeping? Because everybody likes to know a little bit about the beekeeper that we're talking to.
My father kept bees for about 30 years. When I was a teenager, he dragged me out with him and I went to some conventions at Newton Reed College in Cumbria, and I sort of really wasn't that keen on them because they were nasty, stingy things. I left home, went to work in New Guinea for about 11 years, got married. When I came back home, we didn't really hook up properly. I was busy all the time. But when he passed away in 1997, all the equipment was there, the bees were there. I thought, I'll give it a go. It would be something that would keep me in touch with him and his pastimes. I don't like killing things because he was a hunting and shooting man. So I like guns, but I don't like killing people.
No. And when you took on the bees, were they still stingy bees?
Yes, they were vicious, nasty.
Right.
My father believed that angry bees made more honey.
That's kind of quite a common, I think, misconception.
Yes.
It's something that I hear a lot of the time, but I don't think that my bees are any less productive for being calm. Is that what you've found?
Yeah, well, I think it's an absolute myth. Probably the reason that they appear to make more honey is that they get left alone a lot more. But,
yeah, absolutely.
People aren't interfering with them. The first year, I persevered. At the end of the first year, I'm beginning to think, I can't see what he found in this, any pleasure in this. Into the second year, and I was about to give up.
Right.
But I joined an association at that point, and I was talking to a more experienced beekeeper, and he said, well, before you give up, come and see my bees. Difference was just incredible.
Yeah.
And I've been besotted with them ever since.
And just before we get on to talking about associations and the BBKA, how have your bees fared over winter? Have they come through okay? Things look
yes, better than expected. I've lost 2 colonies, but I expected to lose them because I don't think they were queen right going into winter.
Right. Yeah. So you were, in your early days, involved with a local association. Being involved with a local association, you've obviously had that experience, but for anybody who's starting beekeeping, why would they want or need to join a beekeeping association? What's your take on that particular question?
Well, I think that it saved me. It kept me as a beekeeper. If I'd been on my own, I would have got rid of them because I just couldn't cope with them. But I often say to people that tell me that they'd like to keep bees, I said, join an association, go along and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
Get your head in a hive before you invest hundreds of pounds of your well-earned cash, because you may find you don't like it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the benefits I got from it was talking to like-minded people. I mean, their eyes don't glaze over after a couple of hours. They're still interested in what you've got to say.
Yeah.
And you got to see different styles of beekeeping. People kept bees in different ways, and you had that added benefit of comfort and solace when it all goes pear-shaped.
And isn't it interesting? We're all involved in beekeeping, but there are so many different ways of being involved in that hobby and keeping bees that there has to be a particular way of keeping bees that pretty much suits everyone out there. So if you've picked up on the wrong kind of way to start with, there might be somebody else doing it slightly differently that works for you.
Yeah, well, there's that old adage that if you get 5 beekeepers, you get 6 opinions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I found that to be true. And I also say to beginners, find somebody that you like, get on with and trust, and then keep bees the way they keep them, as long as the bees are thriving.
Yeah.
Because if you start listening to different people, you'll get awfully confused.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I were a beginner beekeeper just starting out, and I've listened to what you've had to tell me, and I'm going to head down to my local beekeeping association, what am I going to find there? What can I expect from my local beekeeping association?
Most of them, and the associations are only as good as their members, obviously, but the vast majority of them will offer training and support and mentoring to various degrees. And I think that's one of the main things that you should expect from your association. I've always found that beekeepers are willing to talk about bees and share their experiences.
Yeah.
So you get that. There's the social interaction as well, accessing different colonies and seeing how bees are kept in different ways. Keswick, we do visits to different apiaries during the summer.
Okay, yeah.
And Cumbria is talking about doing bee safaris. So the different branches, there are 5 branches in Cumbria, they would go and visit bees being kept by other branches.
Is that what you mean by a bee safari?
Yeah.
I know that in my time as a seasonal bee inspector, I helped out with some bee safaris, and I know that the National Bee Unit occasionally have inspectors go out on the bee safaris as well. So that works out quite nicely both ways, really.
It's just that, there are so many different ways of doing it, and everybody's got a way that suits them, and it's good to see different ways. And
definitely.
May change your mind. The great debate over single, double, brood and a half.
Those debates will rage on forever, I suspect, won't they? With the BBKA, I have to be honest, I don't know a huge amount about the BBKA, but to me, it's always seemed like a pretty big organisation, obviously helping an awful lot of beekeepers. And sometimes it's maybe a little bit difficult to understand how it functions. Can you describe how the BBKA is set up and who's kind of leading the way within the organisation?
That's a very good question. There's a lot of different views out there about how it works. The key thing to sort of bear in mind is that it is an association of associations. So there are 74 members with voting rights, and those are the 74 associations. They represent around about 30,000 beekeepers.
Wow.
Between them. We have, I think, 1,000 direct members, but they don't really get any representation. They get all the benefits, but they don't have a say in how it's run.
And the BBKA is a charitable organisation?
Yeah, it's a CIO, a charitable incorporated organisation.
And so we have trustees at the top, of sort of board level, as it were? Is that
yes? When I joined as a trustee, I'm in my 7th year now, but when I joined, it was unincorporated charity, and that presented all sorts of problems to the sitting trustees because they were responsible individually and collectively for the staff and the office building and all the equipment and everything. And if something had gone wrong and there was a negligence case brought, then it would be the individual trustees that were sued.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I pioneered, and I will say that I pioneered getting it through as a CIO. So now that's a legal entity. So it can employ staff, it can own property, it can enter into contracts with people as in its own legal entity. And I would strongly advise the larger associations, if you're not already an incorporated organisation, then you should be.
And is there information on that associations can tap into, or is someone they can talk to about doing that?
Yeah, they can talk to me if they're thinking about it.
Okay.
There's a lot of information on the Charity Commission website about setting them up. It's relatively straightforward. The complexity was for the size of the BBKA and the fact that it already employed people and
Right.
owned property and was in contracts. So that makes it a little bit more complicated. But really, it's straightforward.
And so you mentioned that it's an association of associations. So we've got lots of separate. So I'm part of the Norwich and District Beekeepers Association, and we're affiliated to the Suffolk BKA.
Yes.
And so the Suffolk are the overarching association for us.
Yeah, the structure of the associations varies. Some are single entities, and others, like Cumbria, has got 5 branches. Yorkshire has got 10 or 11. Lincolnshire has got 11. I don't know how many Suffolk have got, I'm sorry to say, without looking it up. But so as an individual beekeeper, you are a member of Norwich, did you say?
Yeah, the Norwich and District Beekeepers.
Norwich, yes. So an individual beekeeper will be a member of Norwich and District. I'm a member of Keswick. Norwich is a member of Suffolk. Keswick is a member of Cumbria. And Cumbria and Suffolk are the members of the BBKA.
Okay, yeah. So that kind of umbrella relationship, kind of the way the different tiers work their way up to the BBKA is it's fairly short.
And I hear a lot of people saying, well, the BBKA is not doing this and the BBKA is not doing that. Well, if you really want the BBKA to do something, you've got to convince your branch that it's a good idea, and the branch needs to convince the county, and then the county can bring a proposition for the BBKA to do it.
And is that the ADM thing? Yeah. I'm really not familiar with ADM. Can you just explain a little bit about that for me?
Well, yeah, the ADM, Annual Delegates Meeting, is the equivalent of a limited company's annual general meeting. And it's where we report back on what we've done over the past year. We submit the accounts for approval and budget for approval. And then the members or associations have the right to bring proposition. So we had some propositions about importing bees and honey labeling and so on and so forth. And that sets the direction of the BBKA for the coming year, if you like.
So I guess if you're unhappy with the way things are, you should get involved and make some proposals and change it to the way that you want it to happen, rather than just sitting back and complaining about it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we were one trustee short at this annual delegates meeting. We had 5 vacancies and only 4 people stood, which is never good for democracy.
Would you say that in order to be a trustee, you ought to get involved with the ADM initially to try and get a feel for how that works?
Yeah, well, my route was I was an officer in Keswick, and then I became a executive committee member for Cumbria. I had various roles, and then nobody wanted to go to the ADM from Cumbria, so I volunteered.
Right.
And I found that it was good to meet again beekeepers from around the country and chew the fat. And I think I threw a few brickbats.
Right.
As a delegate and stirred the pot occasionally. And I got to the point where I thought, well, I should be catching these brickbats.
Yeah.
If I'm going to throw them, I should be prepared to catch them.
Sure.
So I stood and was fortunate to get elected.
I do find actually being involved with our local association, I'm a co-opted member on our committee, but it does seem very difficult, even at a small association level, just trying to get people involved, willing to step forward and help run what is in effect just a small group of people trying to set up a training apiary, helping each other with a bit of education and hands-on experience, that kind of thing. It just does seem sometimes quite difficult trying to get people involved.
Yeah, I think that's a societal thing, isn't it? You're doing that in all sorts of voluntary organisations are struggling to get volunteers. There's a feeling sometimes that the BBKA trustees are hiding to nothing.
Right.
And that's not what I found. Right at this minute, we've got a good board of trustees. They're working well together. But we need fresh blood to come in.
That was exactly what I was going to say. So really, you're looking for some fresh blood to get involved and bring in some new ideas and help with the direction.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm in my final 3-year term, so when that finishes, I'll have to step away, and I probably won't want to come back because I'll be getting on for 73, 74. But really, after 9 years, I think it's time for somebody else to take on the mantle.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of that journey, you've obviously been there. Where do you see currently the BBKA heading? Is there anything specific currently on the agenda?
Yeah, I think the big innovation is this online learning platform that we're developing. Went live towards the end of March. It's going to have both member sections and public sections, and be looking from the public sections at how they can help bees and pollinators, education on Asian hornet and other things that might have an impact on beekeepers, and sort of ways in which you can manage the landscape to help pollinators in general. And then we've got a number of programs. One that's live at the moment is hygiene and disease, I think. But we're also open to ideas as to what we should be putting on there.
Yeah.
The correspondence courses will all be on there eventually, probably for the exam structure. One thing I would say, if this is going out, the associations need to make sure that they've ticked the right boxes on ER2 to make sure that the membership has access to the online training learning platform.
Right. Is that some kind of admin thing that
whoever's managing
would know about?
Whoever's managing ER2 for the capitation needs to make sure that the correct box is ticked.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that those people that are out there listening who know what the R2 is will understand what you're talking about. It's gone straight over my head, but
it does that for most people. It's the membership platform, where instead of huge spreadsheets like we used to have, now it's an electronic system. Yeah, and each branch manages its own membership.
Right. So as a member of the BBKA, I can access that online learning.
Yes.
By going to the BBKA website.
Yes. Yeah. You can access all sorts of things on there, including back issues of BBKA news.
Okay.
I'm really enthusiastic about it because I think it's a great innovation, and it's going to give beekeepers who don't want to go down the exam route, which is an important benefit of the BBKA, is the route to master beekeeper.
Sure.
But there are a lot of beekeepers that just want to keep bees better.
Yes.
And this will provide them with bite-sized chunks of learning to improve their beekeeping.
Cool. Before we close, a couple more questions. First one is there anything else that you wanted to just talk about before we finish for this session?
First one is the Spring Convention, which is coming up on the 21st of April.
Yeah.
Harper Adams. If you haven't booked already, you can still get a ticket. You can buy tickets on the day for the lectures and the trade show. The second thing is we were talking about the annual delegates meeting to try and help people understand how the annual delegates meeting works. We're going to be running some online forums, Zoom type forums in June, July, where we can talk about how to formulate propositions and maybe get a few associations together that might have been thinking of the same thing to put one proposition forward.
Yeah.
And just generally discuss how it works. And the last thing is that next year is our 150th year.
Wow.
So we're interested in anybody's suggestions as to what we might do to commemorate such a great milestone.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure you'll get lots of very good ideas. But 150 years, that's incredible, isn't it?
We are looking for photographs of queens on frames of bees. We're setting up an online quiz, Spot the Queen. Because that's the thing that I find hardest about beekeeping is finding the queen.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes you can look at a frame and go, "Oh, there she is," without any problem at all, and then
they take your eye off her and she's gone.
Oh, they seem to have a cloaking device, don't they? They just go invisible all of a sudden, and then you could spend all day looking and never find them. Okay, well, I'm sure that we can get some photographs of queens on frames for you. Is there any kind of time frame that you want for that? Is it urgent?
Over the next 6 to 8 weeks, if they can, there is an email address which I've can send to you so that you can put it in.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll put the website address to the BBKA on the podcast notes, and also if you've got that email address, I'll add that to the podcast notes as well.
Yeah.
So as I said, one final question. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast, Stephen. I hope it hasn't been too traumatic for you.
No, it's been a pleasure.
And hopefully we can maybe get some other people on, and I'll try and hone my interview skills with some others as well. Yeah. But beekeepers like talking about bees, but they also like cake. So what is your favourite beekeeping cake? First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to sit down and chat with you. I've enjoyed it. You've saved the most difficult question till last. Indeed. I like cake, full stop. And one of the great things about the sort of bee safaris and going around visiting other people's apiaries is the quality of cake that's produced at the end of the day. If I was forced to choose, I'd probably go for either orange or lemon drizzle. Yeah, the lemon drizzle cake. As a tray bake or a loaf? Oh, a loaf. A loaf. Yeah. Well, you have to make sure you get these things right. It's an important question, possibly the most important question of the day. I am lured by the colour of the icing sometimes, and that generally proves to be a mistake. We could have an entire podcast discussing our cake preferences. Yeah, indeed, we could. Yeah, that's brilliant. Stephen, thanks again for joining me. Just remind me of the BBKA website address. What's your website address? It's bbka.org.uk. bbka.org.uk. Yes. Excellent. Okay, I'll pop that into the notes for anybody that's either looking for more information about the BBKA or for those that want to get involved with working with the BBKA. Hopefully, we'll get to see each other at some function in the not too distant future. Yeah, I look forward to that. Thanks for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Well, that's me done for another week. I hope you enjoyed that. I will try to hone my interview skills, I promise. I'll catch up with you all again next week. Don't forget to check out my website, www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and for my latest videos, podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks, and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.